Good afternoon. Thanks for coming on a couple hours' notice. I don't think I've received more fan mail from people than I did today on something that is partial and incomplete, but I'm going to let Chief Darnell Brown and then Chief Calvin Williams talk to you about the parts and pieces of this and kind of what our direction is and what we've had from the very beginning. So, Chief Brown.
Thank you. Good evening. Just want to start by saying, on behalf of the administration, this all came as a complete surprise to the city of Cleveland. At best, this is a premature release of information. So, from our perspective, we really haven't received anything that we would consider something we need to accept. And what do I mean by that? We have not seen a study that is being referenced in the document, so there are two things that we've been asking for consistently from RTA. One is an analysis of financial impact as a result, or to the operation as a result of the public square through Superior being closed, and the second thing is if there are impacts, then we need to also look at what are the consequences of vulnerability assessment and threat analysis to the extent that we have a complete safety analysis of what happens as a result of reopening the square. And so, as I said, we have not received any study that has been referenced as it relates to threat analysis or safety. As a matter of fact, what we got was the same document you received today, which is really a one-page executive summary, which has conclusions to it. We were told, and based on a discussion, we had a meeting with RTA on Monday. During that discussion, it was made very clear that we had a number of concerns and issues that we wanted to make sure they addressed. They were going to address that with our Homeland Security in-house expert, Commander Patel. That meeting has not even taken place. That meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and then they represented to us that they would give us their report, their study, on Friday. So again, we don't have a document to review at this point in time. Again, we have not discussed a study with the consultants or RTA at this point in time. We also know that they have not evaluated or mitigated a number of the security concerns that we have given them. That is made very clear. I'll just read one statement with the fourth bullet in their conclusions from the executive summary, which reads in part, the recommended mitigations for both the day-to-day criminal activity and terrorism threats need to be evaluated and implemented as needed between GCRTA, Transit Police, the City of Cleveland Police, TSA, and DHS. So again, they're saying that the thing that we care most about in terms of the preparation for an evaluation of credible risk, et cetera, ought to be part and parcel of anything that occurs before any consideration is given to opening the square on Superior. They're basically saying, admitting that these recommendations have not been considered, have not been evaluated, and so our concern is again twofold. I believe that they've gotten well out ahead of us on this issue. We've been very clear in our process. We haven't changed our position in terms of what we've asked them to do, and we've been kind of at the onset or on the onset. We agreed on a process with them, and that process is not complete. That process does not get complete until these issues that I'm standing here talking to you about right now get addressed and get addressed at a level that would meet our expectations, which is again to have a very clear understanding about assessments of risk, any recommendations for how those risks ought to be mitigated if they exist, and then ultimately a process that will address what happens next in that regard. So I'm going to defer. At this point, I'm going to ask Chief Williams, if he would come up, and he can bring Commander Patel with him if he chooses, so we can talk about the very significant missing ingredient that we're very concerned seems to have gotten dismissed out of hand. It's not even a consideration as it's part of the due diligence that we believe is necessary to ensure that the operation and use of Public Square as a central location in the city of Cleveland, really a place where the community comes together to meet, is one, evaluated correctly, and then proper steps are taken to determine if there are risks, how do those risks get mitigated. So, Chief.
Thanks, Chief Brown. As Chief Brown stated, the main concerns, of course, for the Division of Police and Department of Public Safety are safety and security of those who progress through the square, those who visit the square and use it for activities, and those that visit our city in general. We have expressed early on in this process that our concerns for Homeland Security are valid concerns, and that we, as partners with RTA and our state, federal, county partners, have to deal with those concerns and come up with a mitigation strategy that we can all agree on. This isn't just a city of Cleveland saying that there are issues and these are the issues and this is how we deal with those issues, but it's a partnership between RTA, Division of Police, and our Homeland Security partners to make sure that we deal with them properly. We have, in the past, made sure that people understand the importance of Public Square. The city has featured Public Square as the heart of the city. This summer, and even prior to this summer, Public Square is the gathering place for people that want to voice their opinions on things that happen in this country and in this city. And as such, it is definitely one of the key critical infrastructure pieces for this city, and such has to be protected in that way. The Public Square area has been and always has been designated since Homeland Security started to come up with ratings as a critical infrastructure component of the city. We received grant funding from the Department of Homeland Security for cameras and improvements to the square, and we maintain those cameras for everybody's safety and benefit. The one thing in this whole process that you have to remember is that in the beginning, there was an agreement to go through a certain process to get to the end of this, to make sure that all concerns were met, and to make sure that all the partners agreed on how those concerns would be met and mitigated. And from our standpoint, we're still in that process. Nothing has been decided. We haven't met and agreed upon, let alone mitigation strategies. We haven't even agreed upon what some of those issues are to make sure that we address them cohesively as a group, as a partnership. So with that said, I'm going to bring up Commander Patel, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we see as an issue with opening Public Square without really taking a hard look at and putting into place in position things that will mitigate the risk for those who visit the square. Eric?
Thank you, Chief. Good evening. Just want to mention a couple of points that are integral to this discussion. You keep hearing the word process. The agreement we made actually last week was that we would meet with our federal partners, formulate a question identifying threat. Threat and consequently our vulnerability. As we know, threat comes from outside, vulnerability is from within. It would be irresponsible to move forward and just open the square without addressing any of those potential threats and our vulnerability, and without discussing any mitigation strategies. As we know, we're in a different world today than we were a year ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, when some of this planning may have started. And we know that vehicular attacks on crowds, on crowded streets, festivals, parades, etc., is a very real thing. It's something that members of ISIS and Al-Qaeda push out to potential people who might be radicalized. So given that that is a method of attack which is going to be used somewhere, it's been used nationally, it would be irresponsible of us to say just open it tomorrow and not mitigate or address or discuss that threat. So we've made a meeting with some of our federal partners tomorrow to discuss that meeting, to discuss those issues and some of the possible mitigation strategies we could put in place. Risk can never be eliminated. However, we can buy down risk, and that's something I think we all clearly understand. The other thing of the process is that process works much better when both partners formulate the question and present it to a third party who is being used as a sounding board rather than address the third party individually so that the answer can be somewhat skewed. So that can be confusing and unsettling to some partners. So I just want to mention that the importance here is that we treat this responsibly given the threat environment of today, which is not the threat environment of 18 months ago. We have to respect the threat environment of today, the vulnerability to the square and to our citizens and visitors, and how we can mitigate that going forward. Oh, the last thing the chief touched on was UASI, Urban Area Security Initiative. As we all know, Cleveland was designated a UASI city for many grant cycles, and we did receive some grant funding for some cameras and other items as part of their assigning it as a critical infrastructure. So they did designate Public Square as a piece of critical infrastructure in our city because of its function, because of its access, et cetera. So it's to say that it's not important or critical to anyone, or that it doesn't have these threats or these vulnerabilities, that's erroneous. So thank you.
Just a couple of final points as it relates specific to some of the analysis on transportation and traffic control, if you would, because I know that also one of the other documents that was released today did quote a figure of about an $805,000 impact to our TA operationally. Please note that that number is significantly different than numbers that were quoted earlier by RTA. I believe the original number was somewhere in the vicinity of about $1.8 million. One of the things that we've done, and an example of why doing proper due diligence is important, is we, in a collaborative approach, agreed that using data from the Nelson-Nygaard original study was not appropriate in terms of getting to a level of operational impact. And so there was a work that was commissioned and performed by Parsons Brinckerhoff. As a result of that, what was determined was the level or the volume of traffic that was predicted originally was about 50% of what was originally estimated. So that certainly goes factored into determining what the actual ultimate cost was. I believe the original number that we sat down and discussed with RTA and what the final impact was, it was not $805,000, it is actually about $680,000, with the ability to offset a little over $220,000 of that by some type of operational efficiency through use of technology and other things. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that factor also. So we'll open up for any questions that we have at this time.
Had you done some of the security analysis prior to the convention, for example, of the square with the terror threat?
I think that that's a little bit different scenario. I asked the chief to speak to that in terms of credible threats as it relates to having a convention, a large political convention in town, as opposed to what happens when we have what I call normalized use and activity on the square. As a matter of fact, I believe we didn't actually do the traffic counts and et cetera until I believe the week of January 10th and 11th. The reason why we did that was because we wanted to wait to post-holiday when both traffic, business, and other things were back to normal, so we could get really real counts based on actual usage. So.
There were security analysis done on various parts of downtown Cleveland for the convention, including Public Square. As you recall, there was a severe restriction of traffic in the downtown neighborhood. And as part of that restriction, Public Square basically didn't see the vehicle traffic that it sees on a normal day, as Chief Brown says, and that was part of our mitigation strategy, along with once intelligence is gathered on what we see as potential threats, then we up that posture. And some of you saw a lot of hardening of the square during certain time periods to make sure that we mitigated those things.
Chief Williams? Was there a security, terrorist threat strategy more broadly for the square before the convention? You know, for when there was no convention? Is this the first time you're considering the squares for its security needs? Or had you done that before the square opened?
Well, yes and no. In its current iteration, the square just opened early last year. So in that iteration, we started to look at the security concerns that could possibly invade the square. And of course, leading up to the convention, we ramped that up and made sure we mitigated most of those security concerns.
Chief Williams, talking about the concerns about large crowds of people and vehicular attacks, if you go to Public Square right now, there's usually a large crowd of people in front of Tower City, and if there was a vehicular attack, and I know the mayor's talked about bombs and stuff before, I mean, the study says basically there's a threat either way. I mean, is there really that much of a security benefit for just that little sliver of grass? I mean, because somebody could set off a bomb right in front of Tower City.
Right. I mean, people can set off a bomb anywhere in the city, and we try to make sure that doesn't happen with the help of our federal partners, our state and our local partners. But that little sliver of grass is hugely symbolic to this city and to this area of the country. I mean, it's public square. It's not just a city park someplace. It's public square. And probably 99% of the demonstrations, people voicing their First Amendment concerns, their Second Amendment concerns start or end on public square. It's either City Hall or public square. So we can't say that, well, we have all these other security concerns, which we do, and we try to mitigate those as much as possible, but we cannot identify a huge security concern and not do anything to mitigate that. And that's what we're talking about right now. We've come to that conclusion from the beginning, that there are things that need to be taken care of before the square reopens, and we thought we were still in that process of evaluating and making decisions on those before we come to a final product to say, all right, this is it. And it seems like that some people have jumped the gun and said that we're at that process already. It's been evaluated, this is what we're going to do, and we're not at the end of this process.
Have you planned to reopen the square after the convention?
That initially was the plan, but a lot of things happen between the end of the convention and that drop dead date of, I think it was August 1st. There were some conversations before that date came up, and that's why we're here today.
Whether the square is open or not, well, how is that going to keep someone who wants to do harm from doing harm? Couldn't you still drive a car into a group of people whether the road is open or not?
Again, I think I answered that question for Dawn. We can't, our aim is to stop that act wherever it may happen. But if we know the significance of public square, if we know that it's a draw for people, for public, private, political action, then why wouldn't we secure that as much as possible?
Actually, quick questions for Mr. Brown, if you could step up to the mic. Number one, why isn't the mayor here? And number two, I know that there's a crunch to try to at least figure out if this can be resolved before the RTA would have to pay that $12 million to the FTA. Are you taking their time frame into account? I know that they're heading to Washington on Thursday, and obviously they could be on the line for a lot of money with that new city.
Okay, let me answer that this way, because the process that we've been in, and that's what this is a process, has been an objective process from the onset. The mayor's been very clear about what his position is on this issue. Two things he's talked about. One is financial, operational hardship, and then safety, security concerns. And what I'm here talking about now is two things. One was that we were surprised to see what happened today in terms of what was released, because we've been working in good faith with RTA through the process to get to an outcome. And we're saying that that process is not complete, all right? There is no study at this point in time. There was no study. If you've got a study, give it to me. But there is no study of threat analysis, threat assessment. What you got was a one-page document that is titled an executive summary. All right, and so what we have said to them is, let's go through the process. At the end of the day, when we complete the process, and one of the steps in the process takes place tomorrow, when Commander Patel sits down and meets with its counterpart at RTA and our federal partners. And they've agreed on what questions need to be asked and answered. And that becomes part and parcel of the evaluative process. If they determine that there are some things that need to be addressed, then there would be a conversation between the city and RTA about how those things get mitigated, whatever they are, to the extent that they can. That is part of the process. But the issue is very simple to me. We've been in this process for a while. We met on Monday. There was a meeting that's going to be held tomorrow. We are told that the study should be complete and ready for our receipt and dissemination on Friday. But you can't get to conclusions without answering clear, concise questions that we have around Homeland Security issues, so that the report is thorough and it analyzes all perspectives and concerns, and whatever the conclusions are, they are. But we don't want to shortcut or circumvent the process, which seems to be what is happening here.
Are you saying that they released the executive summary? Are you saying they released the executive summary without finishing the report?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Where's
I
the
think they're
mayor?
finished with it, they just haven't transmitted it to you. I
I-
talked to the RTA who has seen the report.
Well, again, when we talk to them, my understanding is that there is not a completed study.
Was it bad?
Now, let me finish, and I met with them yesterday. And what they said to me was the report will be completed on Friday for dissemination. Now, I can't be any more clear than that.
So you haven't seen the draft at all?
No, we have not.
So from here on out, so you were surprised by this. Are you meeting with the RTA tomorrow when you guys meet with federal officials? They will be present at that, and you guys from here on out, all meetings will be together? So there's no more surprises, or?
Well, yeah, again, I can't speak for RTA. All I can do is speak for the city of Cleveland, and at every point in the process, we have honored our word and our commitment to participate in a fair and open process to gather all the appropriate information, consider all sides of an issue, and whatever the outcome is, the outcome is.
So with all due respect, weren't the studies commissioned to address precisely the things you were asking for?
Which study are you referring to?
Two, both of them. Traffic studies,
You're referring to the study I don't have yet?
the two that are ongoing, that we received the executive summary for, they exist. You don't deny that they
I don't have anything other than the one-page document that we got.
So you don't think that that's a distortion of the work that's been done?
I cannot speak for RTA. All I can say is, in order for me as an administrator and our public safety folk to do a credible analysis of the risks associated with any concerns or issues that we would raise, or the ones that we have raised. We gave them information. We're talking with them again tomorrow because they haven't talked to our Homeland Security expert. Let me finish. They haven't talked to our Homeland Security expert. I don't know how you finish a report without doing that, so you need to talk to him. When that's done, and you come back with whether or not there is some credible vulnerability, threat analysis, whatever that is, if there's none, fine. If there is some, then we got to talk about how do you mitigate that. That is part of a process.
Well, I think that was part of the safety study by K&J, Safety and Security Consultants.
And again, I read what they sent. They did a very good job of analyzing traffic.
That's the Parsons Breaker off one.
Well, K&J?
No, K&J was safety and
No, K&J spoke to, actually they raised,
traffic choke points around.
yeah. So there was some of that in there also in terms of some of their mitigation issues were around traffic as well. Okay?
Is the RTA at fault for this breakdown in communication?
I'm not assigning a fault to anyone. All I'm saying is the city has been and will continue to be a willing partner to get through this process. Our goal at the end of the day is to complete the process, get to an outcome.
The city does acknowledge that the RTA would have a financial burden, though. I know you were disputing the 800,000 versus 600,000 less 200,000. I mean, that's still 400,000 additional.
From what we know at this point in time, yes, there is a financial impact. We do agree on that.
Okay, so one of the prongs has been met of the mayor's requirements to reopen public square.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any negotiations over relieving or mitigating that financial burden for our
No, the only thing that we've talked about at this point in time is whether or not there are things that could be done through technology, traffic control, other things that would further mitigate the impact. Impact means impact on service time, getting around the square versus getting through. There are some things that we certainly could or would do, but I don't think there's a way we get to zero. So,
If all of your concerns aren't addressed before February 21st, are you going to let RTA be on the line with public?
I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen between today and tomorrow. I'm looking forward to the engagement. Here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that at the end of the day, that our partner will be a willing partner with us and will sit down with us, do the due diligence that's required so that we can continue to move forward and get to an outcome so we can give a proper recommendation to the mayor based on what the results tell us. The sooner we can do that, the better off I think we all are. We're continuing to be willing partners to do that. Again, we meet with them tomorrow. Based on that outcome, I'm sure we'll debrief and we'll understand what we've learned or what we will learn, and then ultimately we'll wait and see how this impacts what we hope to become a draft document Friday on the analysis, if you would, for the safety risk mitigation strategy.
I've spoken to some RTA advisors who just feel like the city's kind of thumbing their nose at them and they don't take them seriously.
All right,
That is,
got that.
Can I answer that question?
Are you saying the safety study?
And that's not part of what we're doing here right now.
Or the traffic study?
We're talking about RTA in Public Square and opening the.
But that's not,
square buses.
okay.
So people's concerns about how the city feels is not pertinent.
Well, what the city's been clear on is we're still in the process. It's not complete.
This is not an emotional matter. This is not a field. This is what do the facts say? So at the end of the day, whatever the facts say, that's what we'll deal with. Okay. All right. Thank you.